Hello buddy, yeah, it's Warhammer here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are going to be squaring off as the Empire against the force of the Lizardmen. And this is the matchup where, well, there's a lot of different strategies both sides can come in with and have a viable build. And for this matchup, I specifically wanted to try to do something a little bit goofy and run a triple Hellblaster build. Now, obviously, the Hellblaster, bit of a niche artillery piece. It can mow through most targets given the opportunity to stay online, but of course most players will be looking to shut you down very quickly, whether with fireballs or their own artillery pieces or backline rounds, whatever the case may be. And once compromised, a Hellblaster is 1050 gold down the drain. So something I was a little bit concerned about, but I did want to try it out. And so we've basically gone with a bit of a man spam build, and it's going to be centering on the Hellblasters. So for my Lord here, rocking Boris. I think Boris is a stable, reliable pick. He's a decent win condition because he does, of course, cause fear and terror, but he's got Blood Roar. So you can really quickly rout off, say, if your opponent just has Skinks and some Saurus left over, then you can cripple those and knock him out pretty quick with terror. He's got Crush the Weak, which reduces enemy combat stats, very useful. White Cloak of Ulrich, of course, reducing those stats further. Hold the Line, just excellent. To help keep your troops in the fray. The Midland Rune, which is an item I'm very fond of, just because, well, it keeps Boris in the fight. It's basically, if you don't bring a Midland Rune Fang, there's no point in bringing Boris. And Foe Seeker plus the Onslaught, just to get a little bit more vigor and damage output out of him. And mounted like this, Boris isn't as good of a sniper as, say, Karl Franz. He isn't as good of a buff or debuff bot as, say, Volkmar, but he does apply constant pressure, and he can always bounce back, come back with very solid stats later in a game after your opponent's been depleted. Alongside him, there is a Firecaster, so a bit of an oddball choice here. I decided to dump the cavalry, and I also didn't bring a net, so it's going to be a bit of a difficult situation trying to cover all our angles with no high mass units, but I figured with the knockback change we might be able to pull it off. Bright Wizard is really here to pressure the enemy caster. I anticipated a Skink Priest, and I figured Fireball would be a good way to shut that down. Skink Priest is kind of a common pick in this matchup just because Slann are so very vulnerable to cannons. He also does have the Cascading Fire Cloak, potentially buff a single unit up quite a bit. Unit like Greatswords, for example, will fight a lot better with a Cascading Fire Cloak on them. Plus Kindle Flame, of course, to make the Fireball hit just a little harder. For our front line, it is 2 Greatswords plus Sigmar Suns. Very strong combat troops. They'll hold the line rather well. Greatswords will outtrade Saurus, and they'll just stall rather well. This is one of the few matchups where I think Greatswords can be a decent choice, though still certainly not necessarily a top-tier unit. Behind that, of course, are 3 units of Hellblaster volley guns, ready to unleash hell on any target that finds itself in their crosshairs. And then 3 units of archers. Cheap, cheerful, with some decent range, compared to Lizardmen skirmishers, 120 range. I figured these guys would be a very cheap and efficient way to zone units like Chameleon Skinks without having to invest a boatload of money into them. Finally, and also a decent choice to defend. If my opponent, for example, got a bunch of cavalry in towards my back line and I had him caught up on some swords or spears, the archers could pour some fire on him. Certainly not going to be doing the most devastating amounts of damage, but they can do something. Some swordsmen on the flanks to clear away Skinks. Some halberds, of course, for the AP anti-large, spears for the anti-large. For my opponent, well, it's a pretty standard wide build, though focusing on the Bastillodons with solar engines is something I've been seeing more and more often, and I don't think it's a great pick against Empire. But these guys can potentially be a good surprise pick, and they can whittle down enemy forces rather well, especially if your opponent went with a cavalry-centered build, or perhaps a man spam build if you're willing to kite. Now, the one Mimi choice here is Nakai the Wanderer. In my opinion, not a very good choice in any matchup. Just kind of a trash lord, but he is coming here pretty cheap with Primal Roar. Of course, he's got passable combat stats, so he's just overpriced for those. Looking to paddle whoever comes under his grips. Alongside him, Skink Priest of Beasts coming in with the Manticore summon, as well as Flock of Doom. Standard fare. Very solid at sort of compromising Empire backlines and melting state troops over time. 4 units of Chameleon Skinks here in the Vanguard are immediately going to start skirmishing with my Greatswords and the Sigmar Suns, which is not ideal, but archers will return fire, and they will be able to do some damage. Hellblasters, in the meantime, start unloading on the Bastillodons, and for those of you who don't know, Hellblasters are actually incredibly effective against single-entity targets like this. The amount of damage they pour out, that 750 damage every 10 seconds, does add up very quickly, and they're very precise. So you can see this Bastillodon just dropping in HP in seconds. Over here, though, the rest of the line closing in, some Saurus Warriors, some Skinks, and the cohort of Sotek anchoring things in the center, looking to catch the Sigmar Suns, who I overextended a bit here. So definitely a big misplay on my part, allowing these guys to overextend, chasing Chameleon Skinks. Should have kept them back. But you can see we've already taken quite a beating on our poor Greatswords. And on the Sigmar Suns, so definitely less than ideal. Some cavalry out here on the flank, Coldland Spear Riders, no doubt anticipating Empire cavalry, but there is none to be had. Fireball here does streak in against the Skink Priest, clobbering him for about a third of his HP. Fireball definitely brutal against Skink Priests. Over here in the meantime, Bastiladon is crumbling and breaks. His leadership just not able to hold against that sustained fire, and the Hellblasters just sing. They are annihilating that Lizardmen mobile arty with ease, and you can see this Bastiladon is the next to suffer their hatred. Over here, the Sigmar Suns are definitely suffering, not ideal, and we are seeing a Manticore summon being dropped here. My opponent anticipating the loss of his caster here. In the meantime, this front line pushing through very quickly, and my opponent compromising my front line rather well here. The Coldland Spear Riders do dive in against Boris. The Greatsword's trying to get in here. Spear's trying to block, but not quite working out. I'm forced to pull the Halberds forward. We just don't have enough state troops to cover all angles right now. And you can see over here the Saurus just chewing through the swordsmen while the Greatswords are off to the side a little bit and out of position. Plus poison, of course, affecting most of my troops right now, debuffing them and making them hit a lot weaker. Skink Priest over here did get hit by another fireball, so he's down to 900 HP, but of course leadership holds because, yeah, they just don't break. Fire Wizard, though, is coming in hot against the Skink Priest here, trying to clobber him. Does fire a point-blank fireball, which melts his face off, and the Skink Priest is now wavering and on the brink of rout. Over here, the Skink cohort does plow through, chasing after the poor Hellblaster volley guns, who are unloading at Nakai the Wanderer at point blank. The big boy here just finding himself the subject of all the hatred the Empire can muster against him. All the archery, all the gunfire. Unfortunately, the Firecaster here kind of failing against the Skink Priest of Beasts. And you would expect that he'd be able to hit, but apparently not. In the meantime, the Manticore here does compromise the Hellblaster a bit, being a nuisance despite the Spear's best efforts. And we're able to run off the Skink Priest, but not before we've had some decrews here. Now, Nakai the Wanderer here does get engaged upon by Boris, who in turn is getting poisoned by the very annoying cohort of Sotek. Primal Roar souping up their stats. But archery fire does rain in, and because they're rampage, they can't actually attack the archers. So the archers are just going to rain death and destruction on these guys, doing massive amounts of damage. You can see the Hellblaster unloading point blank at Nakai, who does not have the stats to hold up to this, and can't hold against firepower of that magnitude. Hellblaster, they're actually destroyed despite no crew there. You can see me accidentally microing my crew forward as the Spears do overtake the Hellblaster and move to screen. The very annoying Chameleon Skinks getting into melee there against my archers, and my opponent using this skirmish line to compromise the melee, compromise my skirmishers in melee. Chameleon Skinks, sort of an underestimated unit in melee. On paper, their stats don't look too much better than archers, but when you factor in their poison stats or poison effect, they do quite a bit of damage. Fortunately for them, though, Cold-Blooded is not going to be enough to save Nakai here, and so Boris is going to be able to shut him down, though in turn, I'm losing my Bright Wizard out here on the flank, and this was definitely a bit of misfortune. The fact that he didn't hit that Skink Priest repeatedly, despite rear attacks, something that really flustered me, but we are able to remove Nakai, and it's going to be a trade of a caster for a caster, and I probably should have used the Fireball to just finish this guy off, because now we're going to have another Manticore coming in, and the balance of power is dead even, so things are looking a bit grim. Boris here does try to rout off the Chameleon Skinks, but kind of fails, and our archers are in full flight, and things are getting a bit hairy. Because one of the things right now, even though it looks kind of favorable for us, we do have some infantry in decent shape right now. We do have some archers still online. One of the big problems is that we have no magic, and my opponent still has a decent amount of missile pressure, and he's managed to rout off all these troops, so all these archers, these Hellblasters, and if he is able to, and I of course have no cavalry, so I can't really save these guys at this point. So if my opponent is able to pursue all of these missile units off the field, this balance of power is going to shift very, very heavily all of a sudden. You can see here we're desperately trying to rally the Hellblasters, rally the archers, Boris flying back to help against the Chameleon Skinks, as the Cold Ones actually rampage there, take a few shots there from the archers, I believe, and rampage into Boris, and into the Spears, which is kind of a suicide mission for him. Boris there does a great job, finally picks off the Skink Priest, though nowhere near fast enough. This was really annoying, the fact that he came back for a Manticore summon. Definitely made me less than thrilled. The poor Bright Wizard here being run off the field. Definitely not opportune. Here in the pits, Saurus just showing their metal, just grinding down greatswords, which is pretty bonkers, just how well they perform against greatswords. Unit you'd think would do well against them. Surrounded by halberds, spears, all those units, they're still holding their own. Chameleon Skinks in the meantime here, swarming the greatswords and knocking out my infantry line. Now, greatswords here, absolute chads, up to 116 kills. Really making their people proud, but not enough. They are going to fall there. Manticore here does pursue Boris, has racked up quite a bit of damage on him. And I sort of decided to run away because I don't really feel like dealing with it right now. I wanted to just let it disintegrate and be gone. Unfortunately, those spears are paying the price for that. They are going to engage here on the Chameleon Skinks in melee. My opponent trying to rout them off quickly, but it's not quite working out. And in the meantime, these archers are going to come online and start peppering the Chameleon Skinks in the back, which is a very, very big win for us. Definitely misplay there on my opponent's part. Probably should have just disentangled himself and run. Especially with leadership so low. Now, Boris does swing in over here against the Saurus warriors, or routing them from the field, and that's a big win for us. But spears and halberds bogged down against the Saurus is not going to be perfect. Chameleon Skinks in the meantime being screened away. Army losses is actually going to trigger at this point, but perhaps a bit prematurely. A lot of the ammo on my units still being around. Definitely a big game changer there. But I think probably the leadership loss from Nakai definitely swung things there, but I think my opponent could have still potentially done quite a bit of damage. So this was a little bit of an unfortunate, I'd say almost premature call, just because most of my army here, I did have that single very healthy unit of spears, but the majority of my army was kind of in full flight, and there were still a lot of Chameleon Skinks which would outfight everything here except Boris, and Boris you could potentially chip away at. I think there might not have been enough ammo, but really well played here to my opponent. And a really fun match, just something to highlight the Hellblasters and show how much damage they can do. Each of these guns did pay for themselves. They melted the 2 Bastiladons as well as Nakai, just annihilating them in seconds and just showing how powerful their damage output can be when allowed to fire, even for a little bit of time. Greatswords, unfortunately, did not perform as well, though they did about almost pay for themselves, fighting Saurus in particular. Sigmar Sons, of course, not ideal. Spears. Actually, this unit of spears here raking in the damage at 869, which is pretty nuts. Fighting those Cold One Spear Riders really did pay off. Halberds there, not doing too hot. Archers, though, showing just how much you can get. Keep in mind, this is a 350 gold unit, so if you get a 780 gold value, that is pretty immense. Boris, not too much there. Same with the Fire Wizard. Really, the linchpin there before the army losses was the Hellblasters, and they did a lot of work. They picked off those 3 key targets and snowballed that into a win. For my opponent's build, I do think Nakai the Wanderer is just a terrible choice. I think you're better off bringing a Saurus Old Blood on a Carnosaur, and you'll be golden. Besides that, obviously this build's centered on solar engines. I don't think they're great against Empire for basically similar reasons to what you saw here. The artillery will annihilate them. If Empire goes for a mid-range rush, they will be able to get in range of your Bastiladons and overwhelm you with Huntsmen, especially handgun fire. So I just don't think they're a very good unit. In this matchup, I think they're better against factions like High Elves or Wood Elves that can't kill them that quickly. But still, it was interesting to see them. I think you can definitely build around them. The Chameleon Skinks showing insane value here. I was talking up the Hellblasters, but you look at these Skinks. Definitely an insane unit, just racking up the kills and damage against the Greatswords, raking in the damage against the Archers in melee and the Hellblaster crews in melee. Just insane value. The Beastcaster here, we unfortunately didn't see just how much he did with the Manticores, but the Manticores were very annoying. Saurus perhaps not doing as well as one would have thought, based on how well they were grinding. But really, I think the build needed a little more, I would say a little more focus, perhaps. Ditch Nakai for, if you wanted to go for more this mid-range kite thing, maybe ditch Nakai in favor of Krokgar or a sort of Old Blood, and then maybe some of the funds you saved on Nakai you could perhaps get, although he brought a pretty stripped down Nakai, so you might not actually save that much, but bring a cheap Sarge Old Blood or something along those lines to play defensively. Maybe actually downgrade some of these Saurus to some more Skinks just to get more width. Or swap them out for Cold One Riders. Cold One Riders are actually excellent in this matchup, so if you could squeeze those in, maybe downgrade one of your Skink Javelins to just Skinks and get some Cold One Riders in there instead of the Saurus Warriors. I think that would be really solid. Because Skinks, and especially Chameleon Skinks, will do a good enough job at tearing apart Empire Spears and State Troops, but you really need some ability to compromise that backline. And you need some AP punch to deal with heavy cav, because otherwise this build just kind of lacks it, I think. And you're kind of gambling on Nakai and the solar engines carrying the day, and I think you'd be able to cram some more in there. With my build, in hindsight, Fireball, I should have been a little more patient with the Bright Wizard, and I probably would have been able to remove the Skink Priest, remove that second Manticore summon that way, and get a lot more value. But perhaps Light is the better lore to go with, especially if you're going with the Hellblaster build like this. I could have had Boris focus the caster, and in the meantime net down my opponent's artillery or infantry that were pushing through and annihilate them with the light caster. So just some 2 cents for myself there. Fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed. As usual, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.